Howdy folks, Deacon Parsons here. This video is going to be about something a little more important, a little longer. If you're not paying the piper, you hadn't ought to have a say in calling the tune. Howdy folks, at the end of the 1700s, beginning of the 1800s, there was a Scottish professor named Alexander Fraser Tytler who wrote a lot of history books under the name Lord Wodehouse-Lee. And I've got a quote here that I want to read to you that I think is very pertinent to today. Now I'm going to read it to you because I want to get it right, and I want you to know that I don't really need these glasses to see, but I've got to the age that my curiosity is greater than my vanity. Okay, here's Lord Wodehouse-Lee's quote. "A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves largesse from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising the most benefits from the public treasury, with the result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, always followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's greatest civilizations has been about 200 years. These nations have progressed through this sequence: from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage, from courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to apathy, from apathy to dependence, and from dependence back into bondage." Now I want to make the point here, when he's talking about spiritual faith, he's not necessarily talking about the Judeo-Christian faith. The Greeks and the Romans also based a lot of their civilization on their spiritual and moral and ethical beliefs. Historically, it's kind of hard to find fault with this analysis, and it doesn't take a prophet to see where the United States of America is on this journey. Since the Great Depression, we've turned our government into a cash cow, mortgaging our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren's future to pay for our party today. Depending on whose numbers you want to read, just under half of our population is now on the government gravy train. Well, is that it? Is that all she wrote? Is it time to just knuckle under and decide that since we're already in the dependent stage, that we need to just welcome the inevitable dictator? With what Mr. Obama just did Thursday on immigration, doing something that he told us a dozen times he doesn't have the authority to do, are we already there? As you may guess, I don't think so, and I have a plan. As Lord Wodehouse-Lee points out, when voters can vote themselves tax money, they vote for the candidate that promised them the bread and circuses. This is currently happening in the U.S., and that's kind of beyond contestation. How do we address the problem? Any plan that involves changing human nature is doomed to fail. We can't expect voters who benefit from this unsustainable spending to suddenly become enlightened fiscal conservatives. Nor can we expect the politicians who suddenly grow scruples, because if they did, they'd be voted out of office. Now, how do we avoid a dictatorship? We must attack the problem at the source and find a way to keep people from voting themselves largesse from the public treasury. Is there any hope? Well, contrary to popular notion, the United States is not a democracy. We are a republic, but not just a republic, a constitutional republic. In a democracy, the majority rules. In a republic, rulers are elected. But in a constitutional republic, our elected rulers are supposed to be limited by the document that, while it is changeable, sets limits and balances power. Are you listening, Mr. President, House of Representatives, Senate, and Supreme Court? I was reading the Constitution the other day, something I suggest everyone do from time to time, and I came across an interesting fact. And again, I'm going to read it to make sure I don't mess it up. Article 1, Section 2, Item 3. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union, according to their respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. Now this is famously where the Negro slaves were only counted as 3/5 of a human being. But notice what else is there. For the Indians, for the Native Americans, to be counted as a citizen, they had to pay taxes. Now we know that in many of the original colonies, only property owners were eligible to vote, the idea being that to have a say in what went on, a person must have a stake in the community. This is an important point. As I said in my video about Congress, nobody should be able to vote themselves other people's money. My plan to break Lord Woodhouse Lee's cycle is based on the idea that to vote, one should have skin in the game, just as the Indians needed to in Article 1, Section 2, Item 3. I propose the following constitutional amendment. Only bona fide citizens may vote in any government election at any level. Unless one is in the military or a military veteran or the spouse of military personnel or the spouse of a veteran during their time of military service, to be eligible to vote this year, a citizen must have been a net taxpayer last year. Now how can I sanction the taking away of someone's voter rights? Simple. Rights come with responsibilities. If you aren't fulfilling your responsibility, you don't get to exercise the right that goes with it. If we have to choose between dictatorship and enforcing some kind of voter responsibility before you get your voter rights, it's certainly the lesser of two evils. And there's a simple way to get back to everyone being able to vote. Eliminate the abominations that are government charity programs. They should never have been in place in the first place. We didn't have them until the Depression. Before that, all charities were taken care of by churches, fraternal organizations, or community organizations. You know, small, privately funded groups that could provide help that people needed without the bloated bureaucracy that wastes money and is ripe for scamming. Now, it took decades for this mess to get this bad. It may take decades to clean it up, but if we don't stop the growth of entitlements and shrink them back to zero, we can't survive. If you have a better idea, one that takes into account human nature and history, I'm all ears. Put it in the comments and we can discuss it. But before you claim it's just wrong for some people to be able to vote on laws that apply to others, you need to remember that half of our population has been doing that for decades. For the last 90 years, women have had the ability to vote for leaders to take us to war, but women even today are not required to register for the draft. For purposes of this constitutional amendment, wages earned from working for the government agency would not be disqualifying someone from voting. But after that, when someone files federal income tax, unless they pay more in federal, state, and local income tax than they receive in all federal, state, and local government individual benefits that year, they are not eligible to vote in any federal, state, or local election this year. This includes what people normally think of as government benefits: welfare, food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare subsidies, unemployment benefits, and any other charity or entitlement that's out there. I would also include Social Security and government retirement benefits. Now some people are going to balk at including these, but hear me out. Many people consider them to be earned income streams, not government benefits. Well, Social Security may have started out as something earned, but that was breached long ago, and the people currently on Social Security voted for the politicians that spent Social Security into insolvency. Government labor unions have secured some of the best benefits in the world, often well above and beyond what private companies can provide for similar work. These retirement plans are a major cause of the bankrupting of cities in this nation. Want to always vote? Serve a hitch in the military. Want to vote without serving in the military? Just make sure you pay more in taxes than you get from the government. Notice that just because you didn't get to vote this year doesn't mean you can't vote next year. All you have to do is become a net taxpayer. Why an amendment and not just a law? Well, we can't really expect the House, Senate, and White House to cut their own throats for the good of the country. We're just not that naive. But again, the Constitution gives us hope. Article 5 gives us ways to amend the Constitution. It's never been done, but there are provisions to amend the Constitution without involving the federal Congress. It requires 3/4 of the states to make an amendment to the Constitution. With 50 states, that means we need 38 states to agree. Depending on whose numbers you read, there are currently about 35 red states. Considering the pelting that the liberal Democrats just got, the number will probably rise. This change is possible. This won't perfect our system of government, but by not allowing people who get more from the government coffers than they pay in to vote, it will dramatically and drastically alter the political landscape. It will make politicians have to work for those citizens who are paying the bills, not voters they are currently buying off with other people's money. It will give the U.S. a fighting chance to prove that we are not just another democracy gone bad, but an extraordinary constitutional republic capable of lasting more than the average 200 years and be the first to not devolve into dictatorship. If you think this idea has merit, please hit like and share. If you think it's a good conversation starter, please send it to someone for their consideration. For fun, email the link to your governor and state representatives. If you want to send it to the federal reps and senators just to tweak their noses, that's fine with me. I'm already on all their lists. And as always, this is Deacon Parsons saying, love your maker, love your mate, and do what's right because it's right, and devil take the hindmost.